The American Civil War stands as a pivotal chapter in the nation's history. From 1861 to 1865, the young republic, founded on principles of liberty and equality, was torn apart by the brutal realities of slavery and the question of states' rights. The Union, representing the North and led by President Abraham Lincoln, clashed with the newly formed Confederate States of America, comprised of 11 Southern states that seceded from the Union. The Confederacy, under the leadership of Jefferson Davis, fought fiercely to preserve its way of life, deeply rooted in the institution of slavery. This conflict, brother against brother, would ultimately decide the fate of slavery, redefine the meaning of freedom, and reshape the very fabric of American society. The issues at the heart of the Civil War were complex and deeply ingrained in the nation's history. The Constitution, while establishing a strong federal government, also sought to balance power between the states and the federal government. This delicate balance was constantly tested as the nation grappled with the issue of slavery. The Southern economy, heavily reliant on slave labor, viewed any attempt to restrict or abolish slavery as a direct attack on their way of life. The North, while not without its own racial prejudices, increasingly saw slavery as a moral abomination, incompatible with the ideals of a free society. The debate over slavery transcended economic and political considerations. It struck at the very soul of the nation, forcing Americans to confront fundamental questions about equality, justice, and the meaning of freedom. As tensions escalated, compromise became increasingly elusive. The nation stood on the precipice of a cataclysm, a conflict that would decide whether a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal could long endure. The stage was set for a war that would test the nation's resolve, challenge its conscience, and forever alter the course of American history. The roots of the Civil War can be traced back to the earliest days of the Republic. The compromises made during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, while necessary to forge a union, left the issue of slavery unresolved. As the nation expanded westward, the question of whether slavery would be allowed in new territories became a major point of contention. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, which admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state, was a temporary solution that only delayed the inevitable conflict. The fragile peace was shattered in the 1850s as the issue of slavery reached a fever pitch. The Compromise of 1850, brokered by Henry Clay, sought to address the issue of slavery in the territories acquired after the Mexican-American War. California was admitted as a free state, the slave trade was abolished in Washington, D.C., and the Fugitive Slave Act, a controversial law requiring citizens in free states to assist in the capture of runaway slaves, was strengthened. This compromise, while intended to appease both sides, only served to deepen the divide. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which allowed for popular sovereignty to determine the legality of slavery in new territories, further inflamed tensions. This act led to widespread violence in Kansas, as pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions clashed for control of the territory, earning it the nickname Bleeding Kansas. The Dred Scott Supreme Court decision of 1857, which ruled that slaves were not citizens and had no standing to sue in court, further emboldened the South and outraged the North. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican opposed to the expansion of slavery, in 1860 proved to be the tipping point. Lincoln's victory without carrying a single Southern state convinced Southern leaders that their way of life was under threat. They saw secession as the only way to protect their interests and preserve their sovereignty. With Lincoln's election, the secession crisis that had been brewing for decades finally boiled over. South Carolina, the state that had long been at the forefront of the secessionist movement, became the first state to secede from the Union on December 20, 1860. 6 other Southern states, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, soon followed suit, forming the Confederate States of America in February 1861. These states argued that the federal government had overstepped its bounds and infringed upon their rights as sovereign states. The newly formed Confederacy elected Jefferson Davis, a former U.S. Senator and Secretary of War, as its president. Davis, a West Point graduate and veteran of the Mexican-American War, was a staunch defender of slavery and states' rights. He argued that the Confederacy was simply exercising its right to self-determination, a right enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. The secession of the Southern states created an unprecedented crisis for the nation. Lincoln, in his inaugural address on March 4, 1861, pleaded for unity and reconciliation. He argued that secession was illegal and vowed to preserve the Union. However, his words fell on deaf ears in the South. The first shots of the Civil War were fired on April 12, 1861 at Fort Sumter, a federal garrison located in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Confederate forces, under the command of General P.G.T. Beauregard, bombarded the fort for 34 straight hours, forcing its surrender. The attack on Fort Sumter galvanized the North, uniting public opinion behind Lincoln and the Union cause. 4 more Southern states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, seceded after the attack on Fort Sumter, bringing the total number of Confederate states to 11. The American Civil War was a conflict of unprecedented scale and ferocity on the North American continent. It was a war of attrition, fought across thousands of miles and involving millions of soldiers. The North, with its larger population, industrial capacity, and vast resources, had a distinct advantage in a protracted war. The South, however, had the advantage of fighting a defensive war on familiar territory, and its soldiers were highly motivated to defend their homes and way of life. The early years of the war were marked by a series of Union defeats in the Eastern Theater. Confederate General Robert E. Lee, a brilliant tactician, inflicted heavy casualties on Union forces at the First Battle of Bull Run, Manassas, in July 1861, shattering the Union's hopes for a quick victory. Lee's victories at the 7 Days Battles, June-July 1862, and Second Battle of Bull Run, August 1862, further demoralized the North and emboldened the Confederacy. In the Western Theater, however, the Union enjoyed more success. Ulysses S. Grant, a determined and resourceful general, won key victories at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson in February 1862, giving the Union control of crucial waterways in the West. The Battle of Shiloh, April 1862, while a costly Union victory, demonstrated the brutal nature of the war and shattered the illusion of a swift resolution. The war took a decisive turn in the fall of 1862. The Battle of Antietam, September 1862, the bloodiest single-day battle in American history, ended in a tactical draw, but gave Lincoln the political cover he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. This landmark document, which went into effect on January 1, 1863, declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were to be freed. The Emancipation Proclamation was a watershed moment in the Civil War. It transformed the conflict from a war to preserve the Union into a war to end slavery. The proclamation had profound moral and strategic implications, rallying anti-slavery sentiment in the North and Europe, and undermining the Confederacy's economic and military foundations. The year 1863 proved to be a turning point in the war. In May 1863, Grant launched a brilliant campaign to capture the strategically important city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, which controlled access to the Mississippi River. The Siege of Vicksburg, which lasted for 47 days, culminated in a decisive Union victory on July 4, 1863, giving the Union control of the entire Mississippi River and effectively splitting the Confederacy in two. In July 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg, fought over 3 bloody days in southern Pennsylvania, became the bloodiest battle of the war and a turning point in the Eastern Theater. Lee's attempt to invade the North was decisively repulsed by Union forces under the command of General George Meade. The Confederate defeat at Gettysburg marked the high watermark of the Confederacy and shattered its hopes of achieving victory through a decisive victory on Northern soil. In March 1864, Lincoln appointed Grant as General-in-Chief of all Union armies. Grant, known for his relentless determination and his willingness to incur heavy casualties to achieve his objectives, devised a bold strategy to crush the Confederacy. He would relentlessly attack Lee's Army of Northern Virginia in the east while simultaneously ordering General William T. Sherman to advance through the heart of the Confederacy in the west. The Civil War finally came to an end in the spring of 1865. Lee surrendered his Army of Northern Virginia to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, on April 9, effectively ending the Confederacy's hopes of independence. The war had exacted a heavy toll on both sides, with an estimated 620,000 to 750,000 soldiers killed and countless others wounded. The abolition of slavery, a momentous achievement of the Civil War, left a void in the South's social, economic, and political order. Reconstruction, the complex and tumultuous process of reintegrating the former Confederate states into the Union and rebuilding the war-torn South, began during the war but took on new urgency after Lee's surrender. President Lincoln, who had envisioned a lenient Reconstruction process focused on reconciliation and reunification, was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, just days after Lee's surrender. His successor, Andrew Johnson, a Southern Democrat who had remained loyal to the Union, clashed with the radical Republicans in Congress over the course of Reconstruction. The radical Republicans, who sought to punish the South for its secession and ensure civil and political rights for freedmen, passed a series of laws and amendments to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery throughout the United States. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States and guaranteed equal protection under the law. The 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, prohibited the denial of voting rights based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The American Civil War left an indelible mark on the nation, shaping its identity, its politics, and its social fabric for generations to come. The war resolved the issue of slavery, but it did not erase the legacy of racism and discrimination that had plagued the nation since its founding. The struggle for civil rights for African Americans would continue long after the guns fell silent. The war also had a profound impact on the balance of power between the federal government and the states. The Union victory affirmed the supremacy of the federal government and established the principle of an indivisible union. The federal government's role in American life expanded significantly in the aftermath of the war, as it took on new responsibilities for regulating the economy, protecting civil rights, and providing social welfare. The Civil War also left a deep psychological scar on the nation. The trauma of war, the loss of life, and the bitterness of defeat lingered long after the fighting ended. The reconciliation of North and South would be a long and difficult process, marked by both progress and setbacks. Despite the enduring challenges, the Civil War also left a legacy of hope and progress. The abolition of slavery, the expansion of civil rights, and the affirmation of national unity were monumental achievements that continue to inspire Americans to this day. The war served as a crucible from which a stronger, more unified nation emerged, one dedicated to the principles of liberty and equality for all. The American Civil War was a defining moment in the nation's history, a time of great testing and even greater transformation. It forced the nation to confront its deepest divisions and to grapple with the meaning of freedom, equality, and the very essence of its being. The legacy of the war continues to shape the American landscape, reminding us of the fragility of democracy, the enduring power of hope, and the ongoing struggle to create a more perfect union. The war's impact on the American psyche is undeniable. It serves as a constant reminder of the human cost of division and the importance of preserving the hard-won peace that followed. The sacrifices made by those who fought and died in the conflict serve as a testament to the enduring human spirit and the unwavering belief in the promise of America. The Civil War, while a tragedy in its own right, also paved the way for a more inclusive and just society. It led to the abolition of slavery, the expansion of civil rights, and the eventual dismantling of Jim Crow laws. The struggle for equality, however, is far from over. The echoes of the Civil War can still be felt in contemporary debates about race, equality, and social justice. The Civil War, though a chapter closed in the annals of history, continues to resonate in modern America. The issues that fueled the conflict, race, equality, and the meaning of freedom, remain as relevant today as they were 150 years ago. The ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality is a direct legacy of the Civil War and the unfulfilled promises of Reconstruction. The fight for voting rights, economic justice, and an end to systemic racism serve as stark reminders that the battle for a more perfect union is far from over. The Civil War also offers valuable lessons about the importance of dialogue, compromise, and the dangers of unchecked division. The polarization and political gridlock that characterize modern American politics serve as cautionary tales, highlighting the need for greater understanding, empathy, and a commitment to finding common ground. The American Civil War stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of ideas, and the enduring belief in the possibility of progress. It serves as a reminder that the pursuit of a more perfect union is an ongoing journey, one that demands constant vigilance, unwavering commitment, and a willingness to learn from the mistakes of the past.